الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to the second lecture in psycholinguistics. Today we are going to talk about the biological basis for language. But as you may remember already in lecture number 1, we talked about the beginning concepts in psycholinguistics. And there were some few basic concepts that we did not cover. So we are going to cover them in this lecture, and then we are going to move to the biological basis for language. First of all, we have some definitions here. We have language, we have grammar, and lexicon. We need to know what we mean by each one of these before we go. So first of all, language. Language is a formal system for pairing signals with meanings. When we say meanings, for example, take the word chair, or for example, board, or picture, maybe, or university. This is meaning, all right? And then we have sounds that represent that thing. So mobile, phone, room, building, house, whatever. So signals, here we are referring to sounds. So what language does is that language maps signals with meaning. All right? Very basic. So language pairs or links signals with meanings. I hope that it's easy. Then we have grammar. Grammar is a very important component of language. Without grammar, in fact, language is not what we know, what it is. All right, so what is grammar? What is the definition of grammar? Grammar, or let's say rules that govern the creation of sentences. So how sentences are made? When we talk about the rules that govern how sentences are made or created, then we talk about grammar. All right, I think also this is a very basic word that we all know. Just wanted to make sure that we know what we are talking about. Then, probably this is new, or maybe new to some of you. Lexicon. What is a lexicon? Lexicon is, or consists of, the words of a language. So we have Arabic lexicon, we have English lexicon, French lexicon, and so on. We have another concept which is called the mental lexicon. So basically, the words that are stored in your head, or that you know. All right, so this is called the mental lexicon. It's another thing. We are not going to talk about that in detail right now, but it's enough for us to know what is meant by lexicon. Lexicon means the words of a language. All right, so all of the words that are there in Arabic or English are called lexicon. English lexicon, Arabic lexicon, and so on. This is really important. Now, knowledge of grammar and lexicon, these two things, the knowledge of grammar and lexicon is tacit. Tacit or implicit. What do we mean by that? Well, I might ask you right now a question. If I ask you, well, probably you all speak Arabic, right? So if I ask you, does Arabic allow consonant clusters? Consonant clusters in Arabic. Consonant clusters, for example, let me look for a word here. Maybe there. That's D followed by S. We have one consonant, another consonant at the end of this word, okay? So this word here, D and S. Okay, D and S. This is called a consonant cluster. Consonants, two consonants at the end of a word. Now, can we have two consonants at the end of words in Arabic? If I ask you, and you have to answer very quickly, what will your answer be? Will you say yes or no? I would say many people would say yes, it allows, Arabic allows consonant clusters. Many would say no. All right? Now, your answer can be correct or incorrect. In fact, Arabic does allow consonant clusters, at least in some forms. For example, the word sister in Arabic is أخت. We all say أخت, okay? And the last two sounds are consonants. So that's just one example. So Arabic does allow consonant clusters, but some of you said no, Arabic does not allow consonant clusters. All right? So what's going on? Knowledge of grammar and lexicon is tacit. It's implicit, it's unconscious. You don't know that you know this information. Well, you speak Arabic, you have knowledge of grammar, you have knowledge of phonology in Arabic, but you don't have explicit knowledge. You don't have explicit knowledge. If I ask you, for example, some questions in English, maybe you have explicit knowledge about them. All right? So if I ask you, for example, a question in grammar in English, and you answer me correctly because you know the rules, then this is explicit knowledge. If you know the rules, if it's conscious, then this is explicit knowledge. All right? When we say tacit or implicit, it's unconscious. It's there in your mind. It's really not that easy to differentiate between explicit and implicit knowledge, but just to make it easier for you, I would say explicit knowledge is conscious, implicit or tacit is unconscious. So maybe you know your brain knows the rule, but you don't know, you can't say it explicitly. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But overall, just like when I asked you about the consonant clusters here, just like that. Your brain knows it, but you don't. Sometimes this happens. All right, so knowledge of lexicon and grammar is tacit, implicit. It's not explicit. All right. Now, we mentioned grammar, so now we need to make a very clear distinction between what we call prescriptive grammar and descriptive grammar. Now, when you go to a doctor, the doctor gives you a prescription telling you what to do. So, for example, you have to take this pill 3 times a day or 2 times a day, more or less. All right? So prescription or prescriptive, that's telling you what to do. In language or in grammar, this is the standard way of speaking. So people tell you, you have to speak like this. You have to say this, don't say that. This is called prescriptive grammar. All right? So for example, you go to a restaurant and you want to have 2 bottles of water, and you say, well, can I have 2 waters? And your colleague or your teacher will say, no, you have to say 2 bottles of water, not 2 waters. Okay? This is called prescriptive grammar, telling you what to do, telling you the standard way of speaking. The opposite of that is descriptive grammar. Descriptive is, well, you describe how people use language. So, for example, you go to England, you go to the United States, and you monitor people, you pay attention to what people say actually when they go and order food. And you notice that they say in restaurants, for example, well, can I have 2 waters, for example, or 2 Cokes, that's 2 Coca-Colas, right? So this is called descriptive. Actually, native speakers sometimes speak differently depending on where they are. So they speak different dialects, different sometimes they speak in different, let's say, types of language, let's say, just to make it easier. So, descriptive is describing how people use the language. So it's a language system that underlies ordinary use. So when you go to a restaurant, you go to, well, in the house, for example, how do you speak language? Do you speak the standard way of speaking, or do you speak just, ordinary language use? If it's ordinary, you describe how people use language, then this is descriptive. Okay, if you tell people you have to speak like this, it's prescriptive. For example, we have a couple of examples here. Me and Mary went to the movies. That's a sentence any native speaker could produce. Or Mary and me went to the movies. Or Mary and I went to the movies. Now, which one is prescriptive? Which one is descriptive? Well, if you say Mary and I went to the movies, then that's like standard way of speaking. But native speakers actually might say me and Mary went to the movies. Okay, just to give you an example. Or it's I or it's me. This is she, this is her. So, same thing. Right. Now the universality of human language. Now, approximately, do you know how many languages there are in the world? Just give me a figure. Think of a figure for yourself. According to the latest investigation, there were 6,000 more or less languages in the world, right? 6,000 languages in the world, different languages. Now, when we say human language, we are not referring to any of these, or let's say we are not referring to one of these 6,000 languages. We are not referring to one language, we are referring to all of them. All of these languages, Arabic, English, Hebrew, French, Spanish, all of that, these are called human language. When we say human language, we are not referring to one particular language. Human language. We are talking about language in general. Language as it is in the brain. Language as the brain processes it. Language as an unconscious process in the brain. All right? Now, of course, there are similarities and differences between languages. All right? But there are some similarities between these languages that makes it possible for language acquisition. Okay? So, there are similarities, and when we say similarities, I'm not referring to words. I'm not saying that in English this word sounds like this word in Arabic. No. I say similarities as in, for example, Arabic has syntax. English also has syntax. Arabic has a phonological system. English has a phonological system. There are shared rules. Semantics, it works the same. Pragmatics, it works the same. I'm not saying English and Arabic are the same, but they both have semantics, phonology, morphology. So more or less they have the same basis with subtle differences. Okay? So most children actually grow up in the world, most children grow up in multilingual environments. The exception is when you have a child growing up in a monolingual society or environment. But most people in the world, they grow up in areas where 2 or more languages are spoken. Okay? So as a result of that, people actually grow up speaking 2 or more languages. This is the norm. We are the exception if we only speak one language. All right? So how is that possible? It's possible because all of these languages share some properties. They all share some properties. Those properties like syntax, semantics, morphology, it's the same basis, but with different words. Okay, same syntax or same syntactic, let's say, concepts, same, we have parameters, we have principles. The principles, they govern all languages in the world. Okay, we have principles, syntactic principles, semantic principles. All languages share those. All languages share those principles. But when it comes to words or sounds, languages vary. But the basis is more or less one. We have parameters. All right. Okay. Now, language pairs sound and meaning because we have phonological rules. Okay, we have phonological rules that govern any language, any human language. We have also some morphological rules and syntactic rules. All right. So combining them together makes up language. Any language or these three rule systems make up grammar. And grammar, in fact, is one of the very important concepts or systems of language. Without grammar, as I said, we have no language. All right. Just look at this sentence, for example. The man saw the boy with the binoculars. Now, what does that mean? Okay, it has different meanings, depends. The syntax is one syntax, but when it comes to semantics, it's a different thing. It's a different thing. All right? But these three, phonological rules, morphological rules, and syntactic rules, make up grammar. Okay, I hope that it's easy. It's very simple. Just wanted to make sure that you have it here. Okay. One of the last concepts, very important concepts in psycholinguistics, is the distinction between linguistic competence and performance. When we say linguistic competence, we are referring to knowledge that is in your mind, that is in a person's mind. So it's knowledge of language, grammar and lexicon, that is in a person's mind. If it's in your mind, this is linguistic competence. All right? We have another thing which is linguistic performance. Linguistic performance. So what is it? The use of linguistic knowledge, so the use of this competence in actual processing of sentences like production or comprehension. So now I speak English right now. I'm speaking English right now. So I'm actually performing my knowledge, performing my linguistic competence. This performance can be affected by many other factors. So performance does not mean competence. Maybe I have some knowledge of English or Arabic, but maybe I'm really busy these days and I'm not focused, so I make mistakes, for example. I don't pay attention to grammar. We all do that, right? Sometimes stress also affects your linguistic performance, even in Arabic. Sometimes when you are really, really tired, you make some funny mistakes in Arabic. And that's called linguistic performance. This does not, if you make mistakes in Arabic, that does not mean that you don't have knowledge of Arabic in your mind. You have knowledge of Arabic in your mind, but because you are tired or whatever, then your performance is affected. So performance is the use of the linguistic knowledge in actual processing of sentences. When we say processing of sentences, it's either producing sentences or comprehension. Producing sentences or comprehension. Okay, now we come back to the biological basis for language. the biological basis for language. Now, many people would say, is language biological? Is it biological or not? I would say some people would argue that it is biological. Some other people would say, no, it's not. Now we are going to look at some of the arguments for this statement, for the fact that that language is biological. All right? So first of all, language is species specific. Species specific. Species means, let's say, humans are species, okay? So the human species, that's number one. We have other animals. We have horses, we have lions or cats, dogs, and so on. We have monkeys, we have... So here we are referring to species. Fish, we have different fish species. So language is species specific. What does that mean? It is specific to that species, specific to humans. Language is human specific, let's say, or specific to humans. No other animals can have language. As a result of that, we know, or we argue, that language, in fact, is biological. All right? This is one of the arguments, that language is biological. So humans must have something in their body that makes it possible for them to acquire language. What is that? We will see in a minute. So this is just an argument. Because only humans can acquire language, there must be something in the human body, something biological, that makes it possible for humans to acquire language. And as we said, no other animals can have language. So because no other animals have that thing, that biological thing that makes it possible for them to acquire language. Okay? Now, some of you might say, well, some animals can talk or can learn human languages. You can give some instructions to a dog. In 3 days or 4 days, the dog will acquire language or be able to understand what you're referring to. Another person might say, parrots also can repeat words and they can use them. I would say there was an experiment in which they taught this chimp here, Washu. It was taught 100 words from the American Sign Language. Okay? What they found is that that chimp actually learned 100 words from the American Sign Language. But can we say that because that dog understood the instruction, that that dog has language? When we say language, what are we referring to? When we say language, we are not referring to mere words. Learning words or saying words is easy. Any animal or some animals can produce language, can produce sentences, can produce words like that. But do they have language? Do they have syntax, semantics, pragmatics, all of that in their heads? Do they have it? No. Probably they just associate this word or this sound with this action. So if you say go, they associate the word go or the sound with going. So this is what dogs do. They associate. Also chimps. So chimps might associate this word or this sound or this whatever with eating, for example, or banana or whatever. Okay, so this is association, but this is not language. It's not language. Language is more than just few words. Language is more complex than that. Language is syntax, semantics, pragmatics, phonology, morphology, and so on. So language is a very, very complex system. It's not easy. So, can other animals be taught human language? No, they can't. They can learn some few words, but this is not language. All right, also language is universal in humans. What do we mean by that? All humans are born with brains. Okay? Those brains organize and process language. They organize language. Brains organize different language functions, okay, in the brain, and they process language when producing language or in comprehending language. The processing happens in the brain. And all humans, or I would say normal humans, are born with brains. Okay? Also, human languages have universal properties, and I said that already. All human languages, Spanish, English, Arabic, you name it, they have phonology, lexicon, they have syntax, and they have rules. The different phonological, lexical, and syntactic rules. Okay, but the roots are the same. The principles are the same. But we have different words. Yes, we have different words. But the roots are the same. All right, we have phonological rules. Those phonological rules are universal in all human languages. But maybe this rule applies to Arabic but not English, and so on. But the basis is one. All right, another argument that language need not be taught nor can it be suppressed. What does that mean? Some people think that it is useful to correct children's mistakes, for example. If a child produces a mistake or an error, it's good to teach that child language. There were some attempts also in the past to teach children, like in classes, to teach language to children from an early stage, to see whether they will speak earlier than other typical children. Well, the result is that language should not be taught as in teaching, okay, to children, nor can it be suppressed. No one can stop language acquisition. It cannot be suppressed because language acquisition in the early stages or in the early years is a naturally unfolding process. What does that mean? It happens naturally. It's just like walking. Walking, it does not make a difference if you teach a child to walk, for example, when the child is 4 months, it does not make a difference. The child will still walk at that time, that particular time, maybe around 12 months or more. Maybe 12 months, maybe more or less, I would say 12 months. It's just like that. Language is just like that. There's a particular time when the child is ready to use or acquire language. Okay? So acquisition cannot be suppressed also. What does that mean? You cannot stop a child from acquiring language. If the environment speak, or if there are people around that child using language, and the child is normal or hearing, then obviously the child will acquire that language no matter what. Okay, even if you say don't acquire language, well, the child is going to acquire that language. And we are not referring to deaf children or children who are locked up in a room. No, we are not talking about that. We are talking about naturally typically developing children. All right, children everywhere also, they acquire language on a similar developmental schedule or schedule. There are different milestones for language. different milestones for language. What do we mean by milestones? Milestones means, just like walking, we have steps or different stages. And the child has to go through these stages. So a child cannot come at this stage and then skip this stage, okay, and then skip this stage and so on. It does not happen like this. There is let's say there are milestones for language acquisition. One of these milestones, or one of the first milestones, is cooing and gargling. Cooing and babbling. Cooing and babbling. So at the first half of the first year, we're talking about 6 months, the first 6 months of a child, that's when the child coos. This is very important for later development. Some people think it's not related. Well, it is. The cries of a child are also important for activating the vocal cords. So in the first half of the first year, we have cooing. In the second half of the first year, so from 6 months to 12 months, we have babbling. Babbling. So all children, no matter what language they are learning, they go through these milestones. And I'm going to give you some more slides later on, or some, yes, just some slides, I would say, explaining these. All right, but here I'm giving you the headlines. All right, so in the second half, so from 6 months to 12 months. Then, at 12 months, around 12 months, we have the first word being produced at the first half of the second year. So from 12 to 18 months. From 12 months to 18 months. So the first half of the second year. This is when we have the first word, more or less. That one word represents or marks the one-word stage. At this time, we say the child is at the one-word stage. One-word stage. So the child basically knows one or two, a couple of words. Then this word, this stage, is also called holophrastic stage. Holophrastic stage. What does that mean? If you look at children, you will see that they actually use that one word. They use one word for everything. So, for example, if the child knows the word milk, for example, just as an example, if the child knows the word milk, the child will use the word milk for different purposes. For example, if the child wants to say, I want milk, the child is going to say milk. If the child wants to say the cat is drinking the milk, he or she is going to say milk. All right? Maybe the child will use the word milk to refer to other things, unrelated things. And that's why it's called holophrastic stage. It's called holophrastic stage because the child uses that one word referring to different things. All right? Then we have early sentences. Those early sentences, actually at the very beginning, they are very, very simple ones, very simple sentences. They lack morphology, so there's no morphology at the very beginning sentences. So the child might say, well, daddy go house or home. All right, so not goes or for example eats or drinks. There are no s's. All right, or ed. There's no ed, like past tense ed. No. So the child is not going to say things like Daddy worked, the child might say Daddy work instead of worked, like ed. Alright, so the early sentences, there is no inflection, no morphological inflection, no S, no ed at the very beginning. Then sentences start to emerge step by step. Alright, and then at the end, around 5 years, around at the age of 5, we start to have complex sentences. We start to have complex sentences. Alright. And yeah, no matter what language or languages the child learns, children make similar errors. For example, if we look at this ed example, we all as second language speakers once said good instead of went. We all did it, at one stage at least. English children also, or English-speaking children, or children learning English, also produce similar mistakes. So they would say, Daddy goed, okay, Daddy goed, or Mommy goed to hospital, or goed hospital. You will teach that child and say, well, you have to say went. The child is going to say, yes, went. If you ask that child to repeat the sentence, the child will still use goed. Okay? After 1 minute or 2 minutes, the child will still use goed. Alright? Why? Because we have milestones. We have steps. At this stage, the child cannot skip this stage. The child has to go through this stage. And it's natural. And it's good. Alright? It means that this is a learning mechanism that is working. And I'm going to explain that later on, inshallah. But when you have children saying good, we know that the child is learning that ed means past. And the child noticed this. No one taught that child that you have to add ed if you are referring to the past. The child noticed that and started using ed on every single verb. Even though it's not correct right now, but that means the child noticed that ed means past. And this makes it easier for language acquisition, easier for the child to acquire language. We have the same example, more or less, in Arabic. We have children producing words like masjidat, for example, instead of masajid, and so on. Those funny plurals that children make, right? So this is really, really good. This means the child is now learning to add, for example, at the end of words or nouns to make plurals. Right. Now, while children and the critical period for language acquisition. There is a critical period for language acquisition. We know that children are really, really good at language acquisition. But sometimes, at a particular age, if the child did not acquire language, he or she will not be able to acquire any other language after this stage, after this critical period. Okay? So, what is the optimal period? Optimal here means best. Optimal here means the best. So what's the best time or period for language acquisition? Okay, what's the optimal period for language acquisition? It's before the early teen years. Before the early teen years, the child can learn any language, right? So from day one to the beginning of teen years, so like 12, 13, 14, and so on. Now the critical period is just around that time. Okay, after the critical period, if the child did not acquire any language, he or she will not be able to acquire language later on. And we have the example of Jeannie here. All right, Jeannie is a child who was found in a house, in a locked room. So they rescued, in the United States, by the way, in California. So her father locked the child in a room for 13 years, only giving the child some food, but not allowing the child to interact with other people. After 13 years, they rescued Jeannie, and they found that Jeannie did not acquire any language, and she was 13. They started introducing language to Jeannie, speaking to Jeannie, trying to send her to play with other children. The result, Jeannie was not able to acquire language fully. And that's why some people, some linguists, theorized a critical period for language acquisition. They said there is a critical period. After this period, if you did not acquire language 1, you will not acquire any other language. I hope that it's easy. Of course, this is it's a pretty strong argument, but there is now a debate. There is research saying yes, there is a critical period. There is research saying no, there isn't. We have to find ways to help those people acquire language. We cannot say that they can't acquire language, but so far the evidence is very strong that after this period, language acquisition at least is difficult. All right, thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you found the lecture interesting. As I said, I'm going to give you some more slides, some more information about the content of the lecture. Again and again, thank you very much for your attention, and see you in lecture number 3. Assalamu alaikum.